The crowd screamed, but it wasn't the sound of excitement anymore. It was terror. Jessica's arm was trapped in the jaws of the massive orca, its black and white body thrashing in the blood-flecked water. The once playful splashes turned into violent waves crashing against the glass walls of the pool. Her headset crackled with the frantic voices of her co-workers yelling instructions, but the whale's dark eyes didn't blink, didn't soften. They were cold, like something ancient had awakened. The smell of salt, chlorine, and fear filled the air. Parents covered their children's eyes. One little boy cried, pointing, "Mommy, she's not coming up." The orca dove deep, dragging Jessica under with terrifying force. For a few seconds, the water's surface was calm, almost peaceful. Then bubbles rose. Then silence. And then, the water turned red. The trainer's whistle floated to the surface, twisting slowly in the current, and the audience gasped so loudly it drowned out even the screams. The loudspeaker still played cheerful background music, a horrible contrast to what was unfolding. Somewhere in the stands, a man shouted, "Stop the show!" But no one moved fast enough. And that's when something else happened, something nobody expected. A man in a red security vest jumped over the safety railing, not toward the whale, but toward another trainer on the side. He shoved her hard, yelling, "Get out of here! They don't save people like us." The words cut through the chaos, ugly and sharp, but his eyes were fixed not on the water, but on the manager standing nearby, a man whose pale face had gone even whiter. Jessica's hand briefly appeared above the surface, fingers spread wide, as if reaching for someone. Then she vanished again. The manager didn't jump in. He didn't even move. And in that still moment, something about the truth of this place began to rise to the surface. Something about rules that only applied to some people, and about a past nobody wanted to talk about. It hadn't started like this. In fact, this day had begun with sunshine, the smell of popcorn, and Jessica's warm laugh echoing down the concrete halls of the marine park. She had been a trainer here for years, but it had never been easy. Every morning she woke before dawn to run drills with the orcas, her dark hair pulled into a tight braid, her wetsuit already zipped up when most people were still sleeping. The other trainers, almost all white, were polite to her face, but Jessica knew they whispered about her behind her back. She'd catch pieces of their sentences when she walked into the break room. She only got this job because it's just for the PR photos. You know the owners don't, and then the sentence would trail off as soon as she stepped in. Jessica ignored it most days. She wasn't here to make friends. She was here for the whales. But lately, even the whales had seemed restless, especially Tarka, the oldest and largest orca in the park. He'd been here longer than any of the trainers, longer than some of the staff had been alive. His body bore scars from an earlier life in the wild, long white lines across his dorsal fin, a jagged nick near his tail. The morning of the show, Jessica had noticed Tarka was different. He circled the pool slowly, head dipping under and coming up again, making a low, rumbling sound she'd never heard before. It wasn't aggressive, exactly, but it wasn't friendly either. She told the head trainer, Mitch, about it, but he just waved her off. "Don't get soft," he said, his voice flat. "He's a performer. You're here to keep him in line. If you can't handle it, maybe this isn't the job for you." Jessica bit back her anger. Mitch had always treated her like she didn't belong, like she was lucky to even be there. She knew what he was really saying. People like her weren't supposed to question orders. The stadium filled quickly that afternoon. Tourists with cameras hung from their necks, kids holding giant plush whales, parents sipping sodas. The announcer's voice boomed over the speakers. "Welcome to Ocean World's Orca Extravaganza." Jessica took her place at the edge of the pool, forcing a smile. She saw her little cousin in the front row, waving excitedly. That gave her a small burst of courage. The show started perfectly. Tarka leapt through hoops, splashed the front rows, and performed synchronized spins with the other orcas. But when it was time for the grand finale, Jessica's solo with Tarka, something shifted. She signaled him to come forward, but instead of surfacing gently, he shot up from below, drenching her with a massive splash that knocked her back. The crowd laughed, thinking it was part of the act. Jessica steadied herself, smiling for the audience, but inside, her gut tightened. She dove into the water, as planned, to swim alongside him. The sunlight streamed down through the surface, turning the water into shimmering gold. She reached out to touch his side, something she'd done hundreds of times before. But this time, he didn't glide forward. He turned sharply toward her. His mouth opened. She saw the rows of teeth just before he clamped down on her arm. The pain was instant, hot, and blinding. She tried to twist free, but his grip was like steel. She kicked hard, bubbles streaming from her nose, and locked eyes with him. For a moment, she thought she saw sadness there, real, human-like sadness. But then he dove, pulling her down into the deep. Above, the audience erupted in confusion. Some thought it was a daring trick. Others knew something had gone horribly wrong. The lifeguards froze, waiting for the signal to act. But the signal didn't come. The manager's eyes flicked to Jessica's skin, her hair, her name tag, and then to the clock. Seconds passed. Seconds she didn't have. And then, before anyone could move, Tarka gave a violent shake, and the water around them bloomed red. That's when the security guard jumped the railing, his words tearing through the chaos. Words that would later echo in everyone's mind. Words that hinted at a truth this park had buried for years. The truth Jessica never knew she was swimming in. And as she vanished beneath the surface, the stadium was about to learn exactly what that truth was. The crowd's shouts became a deafening roar. Some people stood frozen in place, hands over their mouths. Others tried to flee, but couldn't move fast enough through the narrow aisles. Camera phones were everywhere now, flashing and recording, catching every second of the nightmare. In the control booth above the stands, the head trainer Mitch slammed his hand on the desk. "Cut the music. Cut it," he barked. But the young sound technician hesitated, glancing at the manager for confirmation. The manager just stared at the water, face pale, lips pressed so tightly together they almost disappeared. "Tarka, release." Mitch shouted into the headset, "Release." But in the deep, the Orca didn't obey. Jessica was still in his jaws, her body limp now, hair fanning out in the water like black seaweed. The bright lights made the pool glow an unreal turquoise, and the red swirl around her seemed almost too vivid to be real. The security guard who'd shoved the other trainer was now leaning over the edge of the pool, pointing a long-handled pole toward the Orca. "You don't wait on permission when someone's drowning," he yelled up at the lifeguards. But still no one jumped in. Not yet. And that was when Jessica's cousin, only 14, scrambled over the front railing and onto the slippery platform. His sneakers squeaked on the wet concrete. "Jess!" he screamed, voice cracking. The audience gasped, but he didn't stop. He took one step toward the water before the security guard caught him by the arm. "Don't you dare," the guard said firmly. "They'll let you die too." The boy's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" The guard glanced toward the manager, then back at the boy. "Ask him why there's never been a rescue for people like her." His voice was low, bitter, and the words seemed to carry a weight that didn't belong in a sunny marine park. The boy looked at the manager. "Tell me," he shouted. But the man stayed silent. Meanwhile, Tarka suddenly surfaced, Jessica still caught in his teeth. He hovered there for a moment, massive and still, his breath huffing out in a sharp mist. The crowd could see Jessica's face now pale, her eyes half closed. A low, eerie sound came from the Orca's throat, a deep whistle that made the hairs on the back of neck stand up. And then, as if something inside him broke, Tarka released her. Jessica floated toward the middle of the pool, her body turning slowly, the current carrying her. The silence that followed was unbearable. The lifeguards finally moved, diving in and hauling her toward the platform. But as they laid her down, her chest wasn't rising. The younger of the two lifeguards began CPR, counting compressions in a shaky voice. "Come on, Jess, breathe," someone yelled from the sidelines. The manager stepped forward, finally showing some movement, but the security guard blocked his path. "Don't act like you care now," the guard said. His voice wasn't loud, but everyone nearby heard him. People in the crowd started murmuring, asking each other what he meant. Phones kept recording, catching every glare, every word. And that was when Jessica's body gave a sudden, jerking cough, spraying water onto the platform. A ripple of relief moved through the crowd. Cheers, sobs, shouts. She was alive. Barely. Her eyes fluttered open for just a second, and she tried to speak. But instead of words, her gaze shifted past the lifeguards, past her cousin, locking on the manager. Her lips moved silently. The security guard leaned down to hear, his face tense. Whatever she said, it made him look toward the stands, then back at her with a grim nod. "She knows," he said under his breath. The crowd's relief turned into renewed confusion. What did she know? Why did the security guard look like he'd just been handed a terrible secret? Before anyone could ask, a loud crack split the air. Everyone looked back toward the pool. Tarka wasn't gone. The Orca had turned, his massive head rising slowly from the water, and his black eyes were fixed, not on Jessica now, but on the other trainer, the one the security guard had pushed earlier. And then, with terrifying speed, he lunged. The water erupted like a bomb had gone off, drenching the front rows and sending a spray so high it reached the bright overhead lights. The other trainer, a tall man named Cole, had no time to react. One moment he was standing on the slippery edge, eyes wide at what had just happened to Jessica, and the next he was yanked into the water with such force his headset flew into the air. The crowd screamed. Mothers grabbed their children, pulling them back. Phones tilted downward to follow the chaos, shaky footage capturing the churning pool as Tarka's massive dorsal fin cut through the waves like a black blade. Not again. Mitch roared into his headset from the control booth. "Get the nets. Now." But down on the deck, the net handlers hesitated, exchanging panicked glances. One of them, a young woman with trembling hands, whispered, "We were told." "Forget what you were told." Mitch snapped, "That's a man in the water." But the hesitation lasted just long enough for Tarka to slam Cole against the side wall of the tank. The sound was dull and sickening, like a heavy log hitting concrete. Cole's body went limp, his leg bent at an unnatural angle. The water around him clouded dark, spiraling out in eerie, beautiful swirls that made people in the front rows cover their mouths in horror. Jessica, still coughing on the platform, tried to push herself up, her voice raw. "Save him," she rasped. The security guard moved first, shoving past the frozen staff toward a long rescue hook. But before he could lower it into the water, the manager barked, "Stand down." The command cut through the air like a gunshot. Everyone froze, except the crowd, whose confused murmurs turned into shouts. "What do you mean, stand down?" the guard snapped. The manager's face was red, his jaw tight. "It's too dangerous. We wait until the Orca calms." "Too dangerous for who?" the guard shouted, throwing the hook into the water anyway. And then the words slipped out, words that made everything pause, even the screaming. "You didn't wait for anyone else when it was your people," the guard said. The crowd went silent. Cole's arm broke the surface for a brief moment, fingers splayed, then vanished again under the swirling blue. "What does that mean?" someone in the front row yelled. The manager's eyes darted toward the stands, but he didn't answer. The security guard, shaking with anger, turned to face them all. "You want to know why Cole might die like Jessica almost did? Ask him why every trainer of color gets the wait until it's safe rule, and every white trainer gets an instant rescue." Gasps rippled through the audience. Phones angled up toward the manager now, capturing his tight-lipped expression in perfect HD. Some people booed, others shouted, demanding answers. But before anyone could press him, the water in the tank shifted again. A low, guttural sound rolled from Tarka's throat, vibrating through the air like a warning. He was circling slower now, Cole's limp form drifting in his wake. And then, just as the security guard was about to jump in himself, Tarka did something no one expected. He nudged Cole upward with his nose, pushing the man toward the surface. For 1/10 second, everyone froze, unsure if it was a trick. Cole's head broke the surface, his face pale, his mouth gasping desperately for air. The lifeguards surged forward with nets, ready to pull him in. But before they could, Tarka dove again, dragging Cole back under. A scream tore through the stadium. It was Jessica. Her voice was hoarse but fierce, cutting through the chaos like a blade. "No, he's not a toy," she shouted, pushing herself fully to her feet despite the pain in her ribs. She limped toward the pool edge, ignoring the slippery floor and the frantic arms reaching to stop her. The crowd was on their feet now, some yelling for rescue, others shouting at the manager, and a few just standing frozen, phones in hand, filming the horror like they couldn't decide if it was real. Tarka's shadow moved under the water, a dark, gliding shape with an unmistakable purpose. Cole's body drifted briefly into view, eyes half open, one arm limp, the other twitching weakly. "Jessica, don't you dare!" Mitch's voice crackled over her headset, but she ripped the earpiece off and tossed it to the floor. She stepped right to the very edge, her toes hanging over the abyss of blue. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from rage. "Tarka!" she called, her voice sharp and commanding. The Orca slowed. It was the kind of call only someone who had worked with him for years could make, a tone between a plea and an order. The water rippled as the massive black and white head broke the surface, just a few feet away. His dark eyes locked on hers, unblinking. "You remember me," she said, voice lower now. "You know I'm not like them." The stadium was so quiet in that moment that the faint drip of water from her sleeve could be heard hitting the platform. Then Tarka did something strange. He pushed Cole's unconscious body toward the edge, closer this time. His movements were slow, almost gentle, as if he were weighing some unspoken choice. Jessica dropped to her knees and reached out, her fingers just brushing Cole's shirt, when a harsh metallic clang shattered the moment. A rescue hook hit the water near Tarka's head, thrown recklessly from the opposite platform. The Orca flinched and did a flash of white water, dove down hard, yanking Cole with him. The crowd roared in panic again. Jessica spun toward the source of the hook and saw one of the net handlers standing stiff, her expression pale and unreadable. The manager was right behind her, his lips curling into something between a scowl and a smirk. "Enough of this drama," he said coldly. "We follow protocol. If he makes it, he makes it." Jessica's breath caught, not just from shock, but from the sudden realization that this wasn't about safety. It was about control. It was about who was worth saving, and when. Her mind flashed back. 3 years ago, another trainer, a black woman named Ayanna, trapped underwater after a mishap. The same manager had ordered the same, wait until calm call. Ayanna hadn't made it. The press release had called it an unfortunate accident. But Jessica knew better now, and she wasn't about to let history repeat itself. She stood, squaring her shoulders, the adrenaline drowning out her pain. She would dive in herself if she had to. The manager's eyes narrowed, sensing her defiance. "Don't even think about it," he said. Jessica stepped forward anyway, knees bending for the jump, and that's when the water exploded upward again, soaking her to the bone. But this time, it wasn't Tarka alone. Cole's body shot into the air, flung by the force of the Orca's push, arcing toward the deck like a rag doll. Gasps and screams filled the air as he slammed into the platform with a wet, heavy thud, alive, but unmoving. Jessica scrambled to his side, turning him over. His lips were pale, his chest barely rising, and just as she began CPR, the entire stadium lights flickered, then died, plunging everything into sudden, suffocating darkness. The darkness swallowed the stadium like a deep ocean trench. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of rushing water and the uneven gasps of the crowd. Somewhere in the stands, a child cried. Jessica's hands pressed rhythmically against Cole's chest, each push a desperate beat in a race she wasn't sure she could win. "Come on, breathe," she muttered, her voice trembling but determined. A cold breeze swept across the platform. The air smelled sharply of chlorine and something else, something metallic, like blood. She couldn't tell if it was Cole's or her own from a cut on her elbow she hadn't noticed until now. Suddenly, the emergency lights flickered to life in a dim red glow, bathing the entire scene in a hellish tint. The crowd's faces appeared again, pale, wide-eyed, and tense. The water in the pool glistened crimson under the low light, turning Tarka's slow circles into something almost ghostly. Mitch's voice came through faintly over a backup speaker system. "Everyone remain seated, staff. Follow evacuation plan B." His tone was brisk, but Jessica caught something underneath it, fear. The manager stepped forward, his shoes squeaking on the wet platform. "We're shutting this down now," he barked. "Get away from him." "No." Jessica shot back, not even looking up. Her focus was on the shallow rise and fall of Cole's chest. Too shallow, too slow. The manager crouched low, close enough that she could see the sweat on his forehead. His voice dropped. Do you know why Ayana didn't make it? Because she forgot her place. Don't make the same mistake. Jessica froze for a split second. There it was. The quiet racism, the twisted power play, laid bare in the middle of a life-or-death moment. Her jaw clenched. No, she said again, sharper this time, her hands never stopping the compressions. Somewhere behind her, the water churned with sudden force. A loud, low rumble filled the air, Tarka's vocalization. It wasn't playful. It was deep, almost mournful. He surfaced, his massive head breaking through the red-lit water, eyes locked on Jessica. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the orca glided closer, pushing something small ahead of him. Jessica leaned slightly to see, her stomach twisting when she recognized Cole's missing headset. The sight sent a shiver through her. Orcas didn't just return objects like that without intent. Was it a message? A warning? Before she could think further, Cole coughed, hard, spraying water into her face. Relief surged through her, and she quickly turned him on his side, patting his back. He groaned weakly. Then, from somewhere above, came a loud mechanical grind. Jessica looked up just in time to see the metal rigging for the stage lights shifting unnaturally, swaying. A bolt snapped with a sharp ping, and then the massive lighting rig began to fall, straight toward the edge of the pool where Jessica and Cole were kneeling. The world slowed to a crawl. Jessica's ears caught every sound, the sharp whistle of the rigging cable snapping through the air, the panicked screams echoing from the stands, the heavy metallic groan of the lights as gravity claimed them. She grabbed Cole by his vest, adrenaline flooding her body like a firestorm. "Move!" she shouted, though his half-conscious eyes only fluttered in confusion. The platform beneath her was slick with water and blood. Her feet slipped. Her knees scraped raw against the rough grip strips as she dragged his limp weight toward the safety rail. The falling rigging cast a huge shadow across them, its steel frame twisting in the red emergency lights. Mitch's voice bellowed from somewhere above. "Get out of there, Jessica." The crash came like thunder. The impact was deafening. A shower of sparks burst from shattered floodlights as the rig smashed into the platform exactly where they'd been kneeling seconds before. The shock wave sent waves rippling across the pool, knocking one of the lifeguards into the water. Jessica and Cole tumbled together against the railing, breathless, the smell of burning wires thick in the air. A heavy silence followed, broken only by the frightened murmurs of the audience and the hiss of shorted-out cables. Then, almost eerily, Tarka's massive head surfaced right beside them, his blowhole expelling a sharp burst of air. His eye lingered on Jessica, calm, unblinking, before flicking toward the smoldering wreckage of the lights. It felt deliberate. The security guard from earlier jogged over, eyes darting between the fallen rigging and the orca in the water. "That thing didn't just happen to fall," he said, his voice low. "Somebody made it happen." Jessica's heart thudded in her chest. Why would anyone? He cut her off. Because a dead trainer makes the headlines. A dead black trainer makes the story disappear. She stared at him, stunned, the noise of the crowd fading to a dull roar in her ears. The words hung heavy between them, impossible to ignore. And then, from somewhere in the stands, a man's voice yelled, "Check the maintenance logs. That rig's been tampered with." All heads turned toward the manager, whose jaw tightened before he spun and stormed toward the backstage exit. The security guard gave Jessica a look that was part warning, part urgency. "You need to decide real quick who's the bigger danger here, Tarka, or your own people." Before she could respond, another deep rumble rolled through the water. Tarka was no longer calm. His movements grew sharp, aggressive, white water foaming around him as he began to slap his tail in heavy, echoing smashes. Mitch's voice returned over the speakers, strained this time. "Get everyone out of the arena now. He's going into a frenzy." The guard's eyes went wide. If he breaches, anyone on the platform is done for. Jessica tightened her grip on Cole and glanced at the boiling water. Tarka's massive shadow was rising beneath the surface, straight toward her.